Now, I think the big question I'm trying to answer is the how. How do we get from where we are to where we're going to go? That's what I'm trying to answer. And I think we have the mechanism at our fingertips. We have the money system. And I'm proposing huge changes, but I'm not trying to say the money system should be this or should be that. I'm trying to tell you the money system is this, and we just haven't recognised it. We haven't seen how we can use the money system to get democratic control of our economy and then use it to build a sufficiency economy. So in the few minutes I've got, I'm just trying to introduce what I'm trying to say, but it's going to be quite tricky and it's going to take some time. The problem, though, is quite simple. The money system we live under, the market system we live under, it's oriented for economic gain in money terms. People want to get involved for the money they can earn through profits or through their income. This builds a growth dynamic. We know that, so I don't dwell on that. But it does mean we've got a two-step economy. We have to work to live, and most people can't really choose how they work. They've got to get a job to get their salary, and then they decide what to consume. So what we're aiming for is a one-step economy where people are doing the work they want to do for the kind of things they want to, which in Molly's system would happen because you're much more close, your production and consumption is much more close. We have a vastly unequal system now, but Richard Wilkins has been dealing with it. But one figure I'll give you, the top paid hedge fund managers in America earn 19,000 times the average wage, when usually we're used to a few hundred times the national wage for the biggest companies. They've got so out in the stratosphere, 19,000 times the average wage. I mean, that's how ridiculous it's got. The environmental damage it's causing, yes, and also insecurity. We have this vast economic system, but we have about, I don't know, is it 3 days food supply in the country or something? The security of it is almost nil. And money is seen as the problem. And I can go through this very quickly. Greed, usury, exploitation, power, financial speculation and crisis. We've lived through this, we know it. Money distorts human relationships and our relationship with nature. But the most important thing that we need to know about money now is that 98% of our money that comes into our economy at this moment, the economy in this country has to be borrowed into existence. So debt is the basis of our economic system. It has to be borrowed. There is no other way you can get hold of money. New money. I mean, obviously, it's some circulating anyway. But if you want to put any more new money in the system, you have to take it as debt. And most of that debt has gone into housing. 3/4 of money issue has been associated with property or housing. And this has distorted our economic priorities. We've already said before, we're mainly working to keep our mortgages going. I mean, most of you haven't got them yet, but you will do. And it's a great future to look forward to. And money divides, doesn't it? I've got a few slides that show this. Very simply. What's valued by money? A thing called economic man. It can be a woman as well. Market value, personal wealth, able-bodied workers, labour and intellect, exploitable resources, and intellectual property rights, knowledge, as against what isn't really valued in money. Women's work, subsistence, social reciprocity, the sick, the needy, the old and young, they're seen as a drain. The body, ecosystems and wild nature, feelings, emotional, even wisdom, not really valued. Another way of looking at this is that what we actually have as the money economy is really just the top of the iceberg. This is the iceberg model of Maria Mies, a capital and wage labour. And then what lies underneath it? Homework, informal sector, subsistence, housework, nature underneath it. Another way of putting that is a three-layer cake with icing done by a woman called Hazel Henderson. Again, the thing we call the market economy is just the icing on the cake, and she's got much the same thing about the defence, the infrastructure, the public, the sweat equity, the do-it-yourself, the household, nature. That's what I mean about getting hold of these slides. You can look at that in more detail. You won't be able to really see that. But I'm just illustrating that what we call the money economy is only part of it. So should we get rid of money then? That's one of the ways people say, get rid of it. But the trouble is it's not practical. It's not practical in urbanised, complex societies, or even in a bioregion. It wouldn't be practical. But the main thing is money really has been in human society forever. It goes right back. All types of society have had some form of calculation of value. It goes back to dowries, injury payments, taxes, and trade. In lots of ways money has been used, not necessarily coinage, but the calculation of relative values goes right back in human history. If you don't have money, it would be very difficult to do larger things like welfare systems or public infrastructures. And also, we mustn't ignore money as freedom and choice. It does give people the ability to operate without having to have personal relationships with people, and sometimes that's good. So what should we do? Should we expand the current system? Well, this is debt-based at the moment. Everybody has to borrow. The government has to borrow, companies have to borrow, you have to borrow, students in particular have got to borrow and borrow. And the trouble is that debt, investment, or expenditure repayment is a very vulnerable system. It's prone to crises, and we've just lived through one. It leads to boom and slump. It means everything's debt-based, including consumption. We know that. You have to borrow to buy a house, you have to borrow to buy a car, you have to borrow to buy this, borrow to buy that. We know that. So one of the solutions that people have come up to, well, let's bring everybody in. Let's have affordable credit. And we had the big microcredit movement where everybody would get credit. And the trouble is that's gone sour because, of course, now we've put poor communities into debt. And now you're getting people committing suicide because they cannot keep up with the debts. They've borrowed 1,000 times their annual income and things like this. So it hasn't worked. It looked good at the time, but it hasn't worked. So let's start again then. What is money? Money is arguably, I would argue, the most socially based institution in our society. And the reason for that is it's nothing more than our willingness to accept these tokens or these dots in our bank accounts or our debts, that we honour those. That it is a totally social construct. And unlike the textbooks, any of you who study economics will be told about, oh, you used to barter cabbages and carrots, and that was awkward, so you got gold, and then you used gold. Rubbish. It's absolute rubbish. None of that existed. None of that existed. The calculation of value, as I've said, goes way, way, way back, way before coinage. So there's no intrinsic value in gold and silver. We value it, yes, but no intrinsic value. And if you want to get it out of your head, and it's very hard to unlearn the value idea that gold and silver means anything, but just say shells. Because there are many communities that had shells as their money. Now, would you lust after a shell? No, you probably wouldn't, but they did, the same way as we lust after gold. It's just a rather useless metal, really. But never mind, we valued it. But the point is, that is only a little bit of money been represented. Through history, if you know the history of money, it's the original writing, the hieroglyphs, that was money. Clay tablets, tally sticks. The history of money is fascinating. And coinage, which is what we think of the gold and silver bit, very recent, 7th century BC, whereas accountancy goes back 2,000 to 3,000 years before that. So basically, people were measuring value 2,000 to 3,000 years before anybody ever heard of gold and silver. So money is an accounting mechanism that says what you have given and what you can expect back at some point in the future. So all money in that sense is a credit, in the sense you hold some capacity to engage, to consume. And there's, as I say, there's no evidence of barter and barter societies. So the key to money that everybody's ignored is that money doesn't exist like that. Money only exists because somebody has issued it. So money has to be brought into society in some way. So the key question, which everybody ignores, is who issues money and how do they issue it? Two main mechanisms. One is authorities, and most of history, this is how money has appeared. You've had some power centre, a ruler, a local head of the tribe or whatever it is, who has the authority to say what is valuable and what should be valued and how value should be done. And that is how money, what we call money, or what we can now call money, existed for most of through history. It was created and nominated by some kind of authority source. And that came right down through into coinage and is largely associated with all forms of establishing value, apart from the more modern one of the electronic money we're used to now. Another route of where money's issued has been through the trade system, where people issued credit in order to enter trade. And when there was no money, people gave promissory notes. They gave, I promise to pay you, and that's what a banknote is now. It says, I promise to pay you. So promissory notes became the basis of trade. So you've got these two things. You've got authorities issuing money, and you've got traders issuing credit. And that built into our banking system. It's all explained in the book, but I can't, I would use all my time. Now, those systems come together. The trade paper system linked to the banking sector came together with national money issued by authority. The banks used to issue their own bits of paper. This is the Bank of Tiddly-Poop, and this Bank of Tiddly-Poop promises to pay you so much. Those banks were always going bust. So after a time, you've got national integration of national currency and the banking system, and that's what we've got now. And that system kind of worked up until about the 1960s, when you had notes and coins, you had the pound sterling circulating mainly as you still got cash in your pay packet. But now, of course, we don't have much of that. That's why you've got to 98% being debt issue, because it's all coming in the electronic form. It's all coming through the banking system. And that's where we've ended up with now. Now, this leaves a debt dilemma. This is why your economy crashes about every 10 years. The reason for this is when the authority used to issue clay tablets or nominated sacks of grain or camels or stones or shells, they came free of charge. They didn't cost anything. So they paid out for their, when they used your labour or whatever, they paid you in these shells and tokens and clay tablets. And they didn't actually cost anything. But if you borrow money from a bank, that costs. You've got to borrow it, you've got to pay it back, and you've got to pay it back with interest. Now, when it was shells, or particularly clay tablets, you can get clay anyway, you dig it out of the ground. So there's loads of clay, no shortage of clay, just a matter of the ones that are designated the official. You can't make your own clay tablets, that would be you'll walk for that, you know. But, so it's not that clay is rare, it's just that the authority says this is the clay tablet you deal with. Now, the problem with the bank money is it has to be repaid, and more, has to be repaid with interest. And of course, if the next person isn't taking a bank loan and you want to pay yours back, how do you pay yours back? And then how do you get a bit extra to pay the interest? And this is the weakness of the debt banking system, which is why it keeps crashing. And this is the most important thing to know about a money system. More money has to be issued into the system than is taken out of it. Now tell this to George Osborne, who is, yeah, basically, you have to issue more money than you take back. Now, in the old days, when the authorities issued their clay tablets or their tally sticks or whatever it was, they taxed it back, but they never taxed back 100%. They always taxed back, even British colonialism, which was pretty harsh when it issues its colonial coinage, only taxed back about 60%. Now, you'd call that a deficit budget, wouldn't you? They issued £100 worth of coinage, and they only asked for 60 pence of it back. So the point about money then is you have to have an issuer. You can issue it free of charge at the point of issue, or you can issue it as debt, which has to be paid back. The debt system is unstable and will crash periodically. The system where it doesn't cost any money, like printing notes and printing base metal coins, doesn't cost any money. And it can just be spent into existence. Now, that is the mechanism of money issue we've lost. That has gone. The cash issue is gone, but it does still exist in other parts of the world that are still largely cash economies, and that's worth knowing. But what has happened, the end point of this, is we now have privatised money all coming out as debt, and we have the public has lost control of it. The public, as we've seen, is responsible for underpinning that system, but we've lost control of the ability to issue our own money as a public. It's now issued privately through the private choices of corporations, individuals, and also, of course, the government borrows as well. So basically, what has happened is the original mechanism of authority-issued money free at the point of issue has disappeared, and we're now in an electronic system which is bank-based, which is all based on debt and is therefore unstable. And that is where we're at. I'm not inventing this. This is how it is. So how does this then mean we can actually get hold of this for sustainability? We must reclaim the right of the public to issue money. At the moment, money is issued through a largely privately controlled banking system, which has, in the main, has doubled our money supply in the last few years, and it paid most of that money to itself. we have more or less doubled money supply, and a third of it went straight into the banking sector. So when you wonder where did all those bonuses come from, well, they actually issue money to themselves. They borrow it and lose a lot of it. But they lend it to themselves even within the same banking system. How do we as a public let that happen? And then when it all goes pear-shaped, who bails it out? We do. And what do we have to do? We have to borrow the money off the banking system to bail out the banking system. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that the most stupid thing you've ever heard in your life? So basically what we've got to do is we've got to say the banking system must not create money, only the public, because we are responsible. We in the end have to pay for it. We must issue the money and as a public and not let it go to the private banking sector. And therefore, the demands of social justice, when people say, oh, no, you can't do it because there's no money. Yes, there is money. It's just we've given it away. Even quantitative easing, even when the government decided £200 billion had to go into the economy like that, because we were getting so short of money at that time, because we wiped about 40% of our money system just in the crisis, it's just gone. What did they do? They didn't spend it. They didn't help pay for health care. They gave it to the banking sector. It said, thank you very much. I'll just put it in the back pocket and away we go again. It was absolutely, it's just been sick. And the point about money is, money stuff, however it is, even if it's gold, even if it's silver, it doesn't mean anything. It's not worth anything unless people will actually honour it. So whether it's a bit of paper, whether it's an electronic record, whatever it is, what matters is it's money because somebody will honour it. And therefore, it's no such thing as sound money. There's only a sound society where people will honour whatever the money system is. And therefore, it's not money that will secure our futures, it's the society that honours that money. And therefore, personal hoarding, if I say to you, can you save enough money now to buy you enough bread to eat when you're 85? You say, well, I've got no idea. How much will bread be when I'm 85? But if I say, I could guarantee this society will give you at least one loaf of bread every 3 days when you're 85, then you say, well, that's okay, I can deal with that. I know I need a loaf of bread about every 3 days. And that's why the rich are so greedy and they won't pay taxes. Because no matter how much money they've got, it's never enough. Because how much is enough? You know, and they won't let go of it. But if you told them there'd be plenty of bread for you, then they might just pay their taxes. You never know. So the financial crisis showed that the public and private money are not separate. We are told that the public sector is parasitic on the private sector, which makes the money. Yes, it does make the money. It prints it. The private sector, it is the private sector that's parasitic on the ability of the public in the end to underpin the money system. And we have to see it that way around. Money is a public matter and is not a private matter. And therefore, understanding what money really is and how money really operates. So I'm not proposing this is how money should operate. I'm saying this is how money really does operate and really has done throughout history. And we're only seeing it through the distorted eyes of the last 30 years of predominantly electronic banking and the banking system. Before that, a third of our money in the 50s would have come as notes and coin issued by the government. And of course, as the government loses control of the ability to issue notes and coin, so it itself becomes dependent on the financial sector. And that's why you've got government borrowing. Government's got to pay its way. If the government pays its way, it will reduce money supply. And it will be an absolute disaster. We're going into that disaster right now. So I think we should see our money as a social institution and therefore as a commons, a social commons, in the same way as we should see air or water as a natural commons. And we should reclaim money as a debt-free public resource. We should issue it as a debt-free public resource under democratic control. We should not let banks issue money as debt, out of fresh air. And again, you'd have to read the book to show how banks issue money out of nowhere. They could just create money like that. The idea that it's the little widow's mite that's gone in, saved, and then gets lent out the other side, rubbish. It's nonsense. But you'll have to read the book to find out why. So I think money issue and banking should be a public service under public control. And I think that would give us the basis of a sufficiency economy, because it would give us the security of knowing that we would get our rightful share of the money in society. So how should we act? What should we do? Well, obviously you can create local money, and that's being done. Molly's doing that in Stroud. Fine, you know, but that's not my bag. I mean, I'm happy for local money, no trouble. But I think we've got to democratise national money. We've got to say the money is a public responsibility. Why is it a private monopoly when it's a public responsibility? It's our money, it's the public's money, and we should decide what happens to it. I also think we should reform the global money, and I probably won't get there, but I have got that at the end of this talk. How long have I got?
About 7 minutes. So.
Right. I think we should democratise national money this way. Forget reforming the banks. Lost cause. No chance. No chance. I think the right of money issue, of issuing new money, should be removed from the banks. I think it should be as wrong for a bank to create money out of fresh air as it would be to privately mint pound coins. That's counterfeiting. I think the banks are counterfeiting. They are stealing public money by being able to issue money. I think we should go back to the state issuing money, but obviously it would be electronic now. It wouldn't go back to notes and coin. The government shouldn't treat electronic money as if it's only a banking matter. Electronic money is a public matter, because we have to publicly underpin all the credits in everybody's bank account. The banks don't underpin it, we do as a public. When IceSave went down, the Icelandic bank, we didn't go to the Icelandic bank I didn't have any money in it, but the people who didn't go to the Icelandic bank and complain. They didn't go even to the Icelandic government to complain. They went straight to the British government and said, give us our money back. So, but it was Icelandic bank, forget that. And the government had to give them all their money. So it's definitely public money. I think we should issue public money. All new money should be issued according to democratically decided public priorities. Therefore, we shouldn't wait for our welfare state or our poor or our pensioners or our public transport system shouldn't have to wait on the private sector to borrow the money, invest it in lap dancing clubs, and then tax it. But they've gone to the Cayman Islands. Can we get it back from the Cayman Islands? Forget it. Let's just put the money out ourselves. And if they want to earn money, they can provide us with goods and services we want. And nothing wrong. I'm quite happy for the private to be there, but it should do what we choose first. We shouldn't have to base all our welfare and all our security and all our sustainability on somebody who's invested in lap dancing clubs. Therefore, I think we should do all new money should be issued as grants or loans. You can still issue as loans, but thinking that that's the best can be a good way to do it. Through regional, local specialist banks, community banks, housing banks, agricultural banks, whatever you want, health banks. We should issue money that way. Now, people say immediately, there's always what about inflation? Isn't this just printing money, like the banks printed money, and inflated house prices, and inflated asset prices? But that was called capital growth. Nobody minded that, did they? Yes, issuing money does cause inflation, and we have totally inflated the system. The way the public issue of money stops being inflationary is you use tax to remove money out of the economy. So you don't use tax to pay for things, you use tax to take the money back if it's starting to cause inflationary pressures. So what we should then do is the private sector can only have access to money if used for socially determined and ecologically sustainable uses. The access to money in a society should be a democratic right. And that's why you should have something like a citizen's income, either given across the board or perhaps given to different parts of the community, or depending on socially how you want to use it. Now, often when people tell you about a citizen's income, they imply it's got to be paid out of tax. And therefore, how are we going to afford to pay for citizen's income? Rubbish. You don't bother with the lap dancing club and the tax in the Cayman Islands. You just give the money to the people. Just give the citizen's income out and let the private sector earn the money off the people with their citizen's income and say, right, what do the citizens want? Now they've got effective demand, and therefore we'll provide it. And this is happening. The good news is it's actually happening. Countries that are still basically cash-based economies, where the government still has a fair amount of money issuing going on, around the world is starting to put out citizens' income. It's sometimes across the board, but mostly angled to pensioners or to children or to families or to poorer communities. South Africa, Brazil, India, Mexico, China, Indonesia, there's a book about it here, Just Give the Money to the Poor, and it's proved to be much more effective economically than microcredit. You're just actually putting money as of right into communities. Internationally, I have got an international thing. I think I've probably bamboozled you enough. So I have got, it would just, I think it would take me too long to explain my proposal. If anybody asks a question, I might say it. Okay?
Thank you.